Welcome to BCU STEAM podcasts, where we explore how teaching and learning across our university are shaped by the principles of STEAM. That's science, technology, engineering, the arts and mathematics, and how they align with our BCU 2030 vision as a teaching-first institution. Today, I am joined by Poppy Wilde, who teaches in Poppy. Why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Dr. Poppy Wilde. I'm a senior lecturer in media and communication. I teach on our BA in media and communication, but also across other of the courses in our Department of Media and English. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I said that wrong. It's the Department of English and Media. I have to get it right.
I keep on getting my schools wrong all the time as well.
Yes,
so yeah. It's, that's BCU's fault.
There's definitely English and there's definitely media.
So we've been fortunate enough to go and have, as you mentioned, as you walked through the door earlier on, your whole staff room.
Yes,
as part of this project as well. Yeah. So I feel like there's definitely parts of the university that are really focusing their attentions on certain specific types of teaching and learning, which is going to be STEAM, amongst other things. So utilising this platform now to serve as a guidance package to other members of staff. So hopefully those that are listening can utilise what Poppy is going to explain as to her approach to course design, to teaching and learning, can really resonate with some of you who are starting off your STEAM journey. I've mentioned STEAM now 3 times in that last sentence. I'm going to mention it one more time. So when you hear the word STEAM, what does it mean to you in your own course design context or teaching and learning context?
So I think that the concept of STEAM is quite interesting because obviously we've had, politically, we've had such a heavy focus on STEM, economically as well. And so it's really nice to start to think about the integration of the arts in that. And for me, that is something that I think is crucial because if we are in a culture that neglects the arts, then what's the point? So I think that the integration of the arts is really integral within that, and I think it's also I would hope that it can be empowering for students who, in media, our students are often on the end of the, you're doing a Mickey Mouse degree discourse, right? And as someone who, my undergraduate degree was in performance studies and drama, so it's a narrative that I know very well. And it's incredibly derogatory, of course, but there is this kind of implicit hierarchy that, science, technology, engineering, maths, they're the proper subjects, and anything that's more arts and humanities based is neglected and isn't seen as important. And actually, as we know, that isn't how our society functions. It's not how our lives function. Yeah. And so for me, bringing arts into that conversation is much overdue, really, to demonstrate that actually, why do we have all of the science and the technology and the maths and the engineering that we do? And actually, a lot of the time, they are put into artistic practices or to convey artistic products. So yeah, for me, it's a good signpost that actually we do need to be thinking about the arts and the value of the arts and the humanities, both in terms of, as I say, what our students do and produce, but actually the value of that in our daily lives. Like most of us consume some form of art in one way or another.
More so now than ever, I suppose.
Exactly. Well. So a lot of the stuff that I do is kind of teach around digital media and social media. And so, for me, it's, and actually with you saying about, half of my office having been in here, I do really think that those of us who work in media have quite a good, we're kind of one step ahead because we're already doing a lot to do with the arts and a lot to do with the technologies and thinking about how media is changing all of the time because of the technologies that lead some of those changes.
Yeah, as well as having early conversations with Robin and with Matt, it was the way in which that your field moves so quickly, and therefore you need to be at that stage where you're comfortable with maybe not knowing everything. And therefore showcasing that skill set to students in that creative, critical sense of the word. Which doesn't come about unless you are willingly bringing in the arts and humanities into your topic of conversation. Let's lead on with the first question. So how do you see STEAM contributing to BCU's teaching first identity?
So this is where I'd say that when we think about teaching first, we need to remember that actually our students are always our priority. That's who we're there for. And as a lecturer, it's an incredible joy to be able to, and a privilege to teach our students. One of the things that I love about teaching at BCU is as well the diversity of backgrounds that our students come from. And again, working in across sort of media studies, but also across cultural studies, introducing new kind of ideas or maybe just new vocabularies that help students to articulate the things that they're experiencing in their everyday lives anyway. So I think that it is a real privilege. But I also think that with our research, for a lot of us, our research is feeding into that. So for me, there isn't that kind of that sort of separation between the two. What makes me, I would hope, a good teacher is also part of what makes me a good researcher. And that's about how we're embedding different skills, both in terms of like the topics that we're talking about and our knowledge of, as you said, sort of teaching the most up-to-date things and being, finger on the pulse.
Yeah.
But also thinking about how our critical thinking skills and our critical writing skills, how are we able to use those to help other people and students, again, have those same kind of ideas of articulation. So for me, the elements of teaching and research that research active lecturers bring in are all sort of intertwined, really. Obviously, again, across media, we have some excellent members of staff who their focus is predominantly on the production side of things, and the industry knowledge that they bring is
irreplaceable.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, our students are very lucky to have them. But I think that element of, for all of us, our teaching is always critically evolving in the same ways that our research is, and sort of feeding into that together. So with STEAM, again, it's about, okay, when I'm talking to you about, this particular lecture on social media, what does that actually mean, and how might, again, my research demonstrate when we look at something that's happening technology-wise, and we look at artistic and cultural manifestations of that, how does that show that you can start to think about these things in really critical ways, and take things like memes and explore their cultural significance, and again, their political significance?
It's opening up the opportunity for students to be able to work in tandem with you at the same time, to go and share their experiences and bring in that social and cultural capital within within their area to the topic that you're teaching. I think it was mentioned in a previous podcast that students don't necessarily see the worth in what they're doing at home, part-time jobs, as anything more than just a part-time job, but the skills that they're gaining in those are so relevant and topical, if given the opportunity to go and share those within the teaching and learning.
Absolutely.
So, 100%. We'll look into STEAM foundations and the blend of disciplines before actually going back into what your research is currently on as well, and exploring how your teaching combines arts, humanities, science, and technology. How do creativity, critical thinking, and or digital rigor come together in your practice?
Oh my God, so many ways.
It's a big,
so many
loaded
things.
question, which definitely is answered again and again.
I think, so what was it? Creativity, critical thinking, and...
Digital rigor.
Digital rigor, okay. So creativity is implicit within both the outcomes of the sort of assessments of the modules that I teach, and the assessments that I create. Because again, one of the things that I always try and think about with assessment design is, what is a useful assessment? And that isn't always an essay, right? When we think about
100%.
when we think about how many people write essays in their lives, obviously, writing an essay is very useful in terms of demonstrating certain communication skills and critical thinking. But realistically, are we going to be writing an essay? Probably not. So thinking instead about, when we're designing assessments, what is it that our students are actually going to do? Now, sometimes that is a writing-led task. So, for example, thinking about writing research papers. Now, the difference that I would say between, kind of writing a research paper rather than an essay is that you're thinking about analysing literature. You're thinking about doing different methods, which might include things like interviewing people, doing focus groups, designing questionnaires. You're thinking about the ethical implications of all of those. And then you're also thinking of the synthesis of that knowledge and how you're communicating that clearly. Now, that's a very kind of basic, doing a research paper, very basic task, but it does demonstrate that kind of the creativity in the process of them designing their own questions as well.
Yeah, I think I was thinking, as you were mentioning, albeit the beginnings of what would be an explanation, the idea of the way in which at level 4 and level 5 you can build all of those factors into your formative and your summative pieces of work, your assessment, that is, to be able to lead on to that being the biggest piece of work that student will connect with.
Exactly.
In their
and we often have, and the key thing with those sorts of things is making sure that students are thinking about research questions that they care about.
Yes.
So it's not a set question. It's very much, well, what do you, and I was talking to my third year students at level 6 today and was saying, why, in terms of thinking about their assessment, why did you choose the module? What are you interested in? Like, don't write about something that you think I'm going to be interested in, because you write in more interesting ways when you care about the topic. So that's thinking about the kind of transferability, but then in terms of more creative methods, using, for example, the creation of digital stories, which my colleague Robin spoke to you about as well. How are they conveying different ideas in new and creative ways? Again, thinking about the scaffolding there, that what we do in the digital storytelling module, which is level 5, we're building on their skills from level 4, but specifically for that module, they have to use the new technologies that we've introduced them to on that module for their assessment. You can't just do what you did.
It's not a one-off.
No, and this is the thing. It's not a case of, well, you're digitally storytelling in the same way as you did last year. It's we're looking specifically at how more interactive forms of storytelling function and how that changes.
But how their skills grow at the same time.
Absolutely, and how thinking about interactive storytelling particularly is a very different thing than thinking about, maybe more sort of linear narrative storytelling. And so creating digital stories, again, functions in different ways for students who might then think about it in terms of creating campaigns or awareness raising or branding or these kinds of things, as well as those narrative stories. As well as modules where, for example, on my level 5 cultural theory module, currently getting them to do video essays. Again, it's still got that critical thinking element, but the creativity is in how they put it together. And again, builds on their skills from level 4, where they were taught how to, use editing software, for example. Builds on their critical writing skills that they learn in level 4, but then synthesizes the two. And again, means that in terms of a portfolio of work that students can show at the end, there's more chance that someone is going to, and a potential employer is going to watch a bit of a clip of a video essay. Okay, they might not watch the whole thing, but they're more likely to watch a clip of it than read part of an essay on, a kind of question that's been set for the past 20 years. But also thinking about creativity in the classroom is a really important part of that, as I said, with that idea of Mickey Mouse degrees, absolutely sort of banishing that narrative within the class itself by leaning into the creativity that we do, by asking students to create things. Last week, some of my students made collaged self-portraits, and the idea was we were exploring subjectivity and selfhood and how we understand ourselves.
I just think you leave, having had a creative, critical curriculum, you leave so much more well-rounded. Understanding of yourself is that much better than, let's say, you're going to go and do a course which is not focusing on bringing in that variety and that enjoyability within the curriculum.
And it's also thinking about, well, what's going to stick with people. So again, a few weeks ago,
what's going to get them back in the door.
And so a few weeks ago, I had a lecture in my cultural theory module where I was thinking, right, okay, there's a bunch of cultural theorists who are not people who I think we necessarily need to pay a lot of attention to anymore.
Okay.
But if you left a cultural theory module and you hadn't been introduced to these kind of staples, then it would very much seem like I was doing my job badly.
I'm very much the same with educational theory, so yes, completely agree.
It's that kind of thing of, okay, I've got a really diverse group of people, and then I'm going, oh, here's another dead white man, and another dead white man, and another dead white man, and so, part of the conversation there being critically going, well, why are there no women? Why are there no people of colour? And obviously embedding that knowledge. But still got to go through the dead white men. And so, and those kind of traditional theories, some of which obviously have great holes and gaps in them. So how do I get the students to remember them? I'm going to get them to make dating profiles for these cultural theorists. And the dating profiles can be, they need to retain a bit of factual kind of information, but where might we see them like hanging out? What might their hobbies have been?
How cool is
that kind of thing. So just like small elements like that in terms of creativity in the classroom, of just thinking, having opportunities for people to digest the information in different ways is really key to embedding that across the curriculum.
But it's not just different ways. We looked at that social and cultural capital. We look at now the ways in which the hobbies, the interests of the learners, and bringing something which is old and clunky. And I think if you're just having that cultural theory in regards to you're going to go and study cultural theory, that might be off-putting to learners as a topic. And there's so many of these titles of modules that just need reinvigorating. And where you can't, you have to go and throw in innovative, creative, fun, enjoyable means of formative and summative assessments in there as well. So that to me that sounds great fun.
It was good as well, because the level 4 module before that was called pop culture. And so that was another one that I worked on the design of, because it was what we call our transition module, which is students have come out of college, they've come into higher education, and we need to sort of make sure that they're understanding some of the kind of the relevance of what we're doing, some of the rules of what we're doing, but we want them to have that kind of sense of again, that scaffolded learning and that having relevance to them. So pop culture, the idea of that was, okay, we want you to start thinking about culture, we want you to start thinking about cultural theory, but we immediately want to do it in a way in which it's not going in with the super heavy stuff straight away, but it's saying, look, when we think about culture, this is what it means. And if you've been, watching Taylor Swift's latest video, that is a part of how we can analyse culture. So then when it comes to the level 5 cultural theory module, I then am playing TikToks of someone selling a bottle, which is a particular type of bottle, and I'm talking about how the theories that we're looking at relate to the media that we're seeing as well, and also relate to things like, okay, well, now we can start to think about TikTok Shop and how that's something that my students are potentially using. Well, I don't know why I'm saying they're potentially using, I've used it as well. But thinking about, again, how are we seeing those things sort of embedded throughout? And for me, I think part of that, again, that it's about how creativity then leads into that critical thinking that you're talking about as well. That if I can demonstrate how you can watch someone's influencer video selling a bottle, and that demonstrates how these cultural theories are live and in action every day, then not only is that engaging with the kind of creative elements and students thinking about and reflecting on their own practice and also their own content creation potentially, but also switching on those critical thinking gears that are going, oh, okay, so this isn't just like a sort of random theory that doesn't apply to my life, but is something that I'm seeing every day and I'm surrounded by every day and I'm contributing to every day. And then in terms of digital rigor, I think the key thing there is throughout bringing things back to how are you thinking about the practices that you're engaging in? What is the wider repercussion of that? And what are some of the things that people say that essentially just aren't true? So it's bringing, again, critical thinking and digital rigor together. Because one of the things that I always tell my students, and it's a long time since it's happened, but I always tell my students for my social media modules, do not at any point in your assignment say, everyone has access to social media.
Yeah.
They don't. That is not true. It's categorically not true. But why are we saying that? What makes you think that? If we go into that, if we delve into that, and so then when we're thinking about digital rigor, thinking about, okay, what is it that you're trying to do? So, through social media, for example, what is it that you're trying to do? Who is it that you're trying to mobilize? Who is it that you're trying to communicate with? Do those people have access to those things? What are those people's problems? And that, a lot of that comes into thinking about accessibility in digital domains. And that, I think, is something that not everyone thinks about, in part because of the design of a lot of social media tools don't focus on accessibility. They're kind of created to suit one audience and then don't necessarily kind of evolve as quickly as we might like. And so then thinking again about that, okay, well, how does that enable that critical thinking about power and who has power? How does that then involve creativity in terms
it opens
of...
the door up to so much, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it really does.
And that idea of then how do we creatively respond to the challenges
in
that
my
are
mind
inbuilt?
there, in terms of, how do we creatively respond, but therefore what cross-college, cross-school, cross-whatever BCU are using right now, disciplines can that align to?
Yeah.
Again, you're involved in many modules across different courses, but where the opportunity for staff who are maybe listening today going and suggesting that they may use TikTok in one way or another in their classroom at the same time, but in a different capacity for different learning gains, where there could be opportunities for that cross-college interdisciplinary action.
Absolutely. And it's things like if we were to think about technical engineering, for example, it's like, okay, well, if you were going to design a new social media platform and it was going to tackle one of the problems that we see on any of the other social media platforms.
Please let me interject. What a great assessment that is.
I mean, that isn't what their current assessment is, but maybe next year.
What a great assessment that is. In regards to a STEAM-based creative assessment, having multiple different courses associating a learner or two, and then it's a team-based. Oh, wow.
And what I have done with my level 7s when teaching social media at that level is make students create social media content that has to both work around a particular a brand or a product or essentially a business on social media. So it needs to work for promotion purposes, but also needs to draw on the different technologies that are available for doing that. So the assessment they're looking at, how are they bringing in everything that they've seen from, for example, influencer culture? How do influencers speak to us? How can we understand those as rhetorical patterns and as performances and as tactics that we can kind of break down and understand? So how are they then embedding that in their own assessment response? But also, how are they bringing that into responding to the different technologies that each of the different social media platforms are bringing to a possibility, as well as thinking about, right, well, I'm expecting your work to be accessible and to just like really simple things, like a lot of people don't know what Pascal case is or what camel case is, and it's about capitalizing the first letter in each word, so that for screen readers they understand on a hashtag where the different words are broken up rather than it just being a kind of whole long thing. So I'm getting my students to think about how are they creating accessible content that works within the parameters of the technologies that they're given, that utilizes creative methods of engagement, and trying to sort of bring all of that together, which again harnesses that critical thinking to go, okay, what are the problems that I'm facing here? Or if they're going, oh, well, I thought I'd use TikTok, but then I'm encountering this problem. Okay, how are you going to get over that?
Self-diagnosing the problems, aren't they?
They are, and it's really important that it's a conversation, because, for example, my students last year at level 7, they changed my mind about something for the assessment, which is great, which is what we want. So
having the flexibility to do that in a nutshell is something that I hope listeners will be able to go and take from this, is that you're showing the flexibility to be able to go and shift assessment to the student needs, which
Yeah.
is going to be vitally important.
And it does change, you know, kind of year on year. And basically what it was that I'd said you can't use any AI generated content.
Okay.
Because, you know, you need to show your creativity, not AI's creativity. You need to show yours. And they were kind of fine with that. But then they said, not even AI voiceovers. And I said, no, you need to use your own voice. And then I thought, and then they said, well, but you're asking us to use social media technologies and the current trends.
AI, is that?
It's always they're always using that AI, speech. And you know, we know the classic AI voice that comes up in TikToks. And I was like, yeah, you know what, you're perfectly right. So you still need to write the content, but if you want to use one of those AI readers, because it fits the trend, crucially, it's still your creativity, it's still your word, it's your content that you're creating. You're not able to use AI to generate your images, for example, or your videos, but yeah, that's a way in which keeping up with the technology. If I'm saying use social media practices that you see, and you're saying, well, this is a social media practice, then you're absolutely right. I shouldn't take that out of you because, again, we're responding to the landscape that we're in, and having that responsiveness is important. Yeah.
Yeah. We in terms of what we move on to next, which is citizenship and the links to employability-focused learning outcomes. The use of AI being embedded within courses is a very topical point.
Yeah.
And where staff are and where staff are moving towards. Evidently, with your example there of how you kind of just moulded your thought processes in the way to the student-centered approach, which I think is just marvellous.
Yeah.
Building on that then, so we're looking at questions now based on the STEAM attributes, which are knowing, doing, and being. My cold just came in straight away there as I got through doing there, so apologies everybody. Knowing, focusing in on critical thinking and creativity. We spoke at length about both of those things, but we've got some questions on that. Doing, which is collaboration and communication, about how you are installing that within your students and building on that as level 4s, 5 and 6s go on. And then being, being in that situation where they're owning their learning, but they're also comfortable in being uncomfortable, ready to kind of like take on different challenges that they may face. So in a question for knowing, how do you nurture creativity or critical thinking in your sessions?
I think, like say, a lot of it about making room for creative responses to questions, whether those are big questions or small questions as well, just allowing opportunities for students to express themselves in different ways, I would hope anyway. And so, sorry, can you repeat the question? It's dropped out of my brain.
How do you nurture creativity or critical thinking in your sessions?
Yeah, so in terms of thinking about that, with the creativity, as I say, embedding that in particular in session-based activities that demonstrate, as I say, how these different things that we're exploring are evident in their daily lives, and also in terms of just them thinking creatively. Like I just love hearing students kind of come up with questions that that they want to find out more about, that are just new ways of thinking about things. And I think that's really important as well, about just probably like my way is just like being a bit of an off the wall lecturer sometimes, where I will pick totally random things and kind of demonstrate how actually I could take these two totally random things.
Your 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah, and I can sort of start to work through something there. And actually, I think that comes into critical thinking. I think actually one of the main skills as a lecturer, obviously knowledge is great, but the critical thinking and quick thinking is the thing that's really useful for you, because when we think about what students might say to us and how we might respond to that, I don't know what a student's going to ask me. I don't know what a student might suggest that they want to focus their research or their assignment or their video essay or their social media on. I don't know. And so I'm not going to have all of the knowledge or the expertise in all of those areas. But how am I immediately able to engage those critical thinking skills to just kind of run through potential ideas. And so, for example, again, today I had my students coming up with activist campaigns for social media. And I sort of said, they can be, big, important things, or they can just be silly. Like, that's also fine. I don't mind. As it was, they all chose some really kind of pertinent topical
I'm
ideas.
not surprised by that.
Yeah, they're very. I mean, my students are fantastic.
Yeah.
But one of the groups came up with this idea for. They wanted to do something that was raising awareness about food banks and food bank usage, and they said. We're thinking about doing something to do with tea and biscuits. And I was like, okay. So it was called Brew and Biscuits for All. And it was this idea of, and I went to talk to them about it, and I said, okay, so you've got this idea about tea and biscuits, and then you've got this idea about food banks. So how are you bringing those together? Maybe it's, that everyone in the UK, because the focus was the UK, should have access to a cup of tea, because that's our stereotypical. Exactly. So this led to kind of Brew and Biscuits for All. So I think also within the kind of classroom context, it's about sometimes just nudging those connections a little bit on with students. I also think, there's a really good thing about asking students questions that they then answer, and they don't know what they're going to say when they start answering the question. But as it comes out, it makes perfect sense.
It was what I was going to mention. In the last, since we began, it's been very obvious that you are the kind of teacher that asks, "Why are you thinking this?"
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Yeah.
And again, you don't know what they're going to come back with when it comes to those sort of questions. But just a why and a how question is deep learning, deep level thinking will always offer the opportunity for you to prompt in a critical manner at the same time. So,
And I would say my favorite question is when I'm lecturing is, does that make sense? I'm constantly checking, does that make sense? Because I'm constantly saying as well, there's no such thing as a stupid question, because if you have a question, someone else in the room will have a question as well. But that thing of checking learning, and it's because sometimes there is that thing of the way that I've explained something will hit for 50% of the class, and they'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. But for the other 50%, they'll just be going, I don't know. And so, and empowering students to be able to say, no, that doesn't make sense. I need more. And I love it when students do that. I'm like, yeah, great question. And that, really simple thing, but that immediate feedback of, I'm grateful for you asking a question.
I would do this exactly same thing. I found when I first started teaching, I had a tick, which was I'd ask a question or finish explaining something and go, okay. And my learners would all go, yeah.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, wow.
This is working.
I must be a really good teacher, because every single one of my students is understanding what I'm saying. And so I'd move on.
Yeah.
And it came to the first bit of formative assessment, and I'm going, oh, okay, well, the level isn't where I associated it being with the responses that I was getting in the classroom. And it was me. It was always me. If I had a teacher coming up to me and asking me, have you got that? Is that okay? Of course, at that point, I'm going to say, yes, of course, because I feel like I'm silly or stupid otherwise. And so I flipped that narrative on it.
Yeah.
And said, okay, well, then offer it me back in your version or your take of events. And in that way, then the learners would go, okay, well, can you help me a little bit more?
Yeah.
Yes, of course I can. Or your peers can help you.
Absolutely. And it's the same with saying to students, oh, are you familiar with capitalism? And they all go, yeah. And then okay, can you explain it?
Precisely.
And that's a mean thing to do. No one likes to be put on the spot.
No, I don't think it is a mean thing. I think it's an educator's
and I think
right
it's about you again checking where the level is at.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll give a simple version of it, and then I'll kind of go into it a bit more detail. But as I say, I think the main thing with does that make sense is also looking at people's faces a lot, because students might not say no, it doesn't make sense, but I'm like, I can tell. I can tell that I've not explain this as well as I need to. And I think actually there's something really important about, for me, in terms of demonstrating critical thinking in a classroom, that being the lecturer who is also saying, does that make sense? Is that right? Does this mean this? And, almost showing your working as well. You know, I will always say to my students, like, I'm not an expert in, you know, I'm an expert in a few things.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert in everything. And, you know, you're going to have questions that I can't answer.
Well, you're role modelling critical thinking
exactly
yourself.
That's the aim anyway.
Yeah, which again is fantastic teaching, allowing students to go and see your processes, which they can either replicate or create on their own, which is great. Doing. I'm guessing the students are going to be very good at knowing in your classroom. Doing. So how do we set up the opportunity for collaboration and aiding in developing communication, especially within the jobs that your students are going to be going into? Those are going to be two very important facts.
Yeah, sure. So this again is in most of my modules, it's about stuff that's happening in the classroom rather than stuff that's happening in assessments, although I have led modules where they've had group-based assessment. And of course, we always say to our students, why are we putting you in a group when everyone hates working in groups?
Why do you think that?
Why do I think people hate being put in groups? Because students are under incredible amounts of pressure to get the mark that they want to get at university. They're paying an awful lot. They're putting in a lot of time, effort, 3 years at least. And with the amount of time and money it takes, students feel like they need to have that end goal of saying, I came out with this mark.
Their control over the end goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's an awful lot of pressure there, especially with something where your degree is in the arts. I remember, again, when I was doing performance studies and drama, I remember exactly the same thing. If I'm doing this degree in this area, I need to get a first to show that I am clever and I do stand out, and that this wasn't just an easy ride for me.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I don't think that's what our students have at all, but I understand that pressure. So when you're working in a group-based environment, exactly as you say, you don't have that control. And part of that is really important. That's an incredibly important experience to have. But equally, I think that it can sometimes work better where students have to deal with those frustrations, but they don't have quite the same stakes attached to it in terms of their mark being attached to a group mark.
Yeah, group-based assessment with individual assessment grading.
Yeah,
I think is more of the way to go. So yeah, you can work and perform in a group, but you're not measured on the group's performance as a whole.
Exactly.
Because there has to be supplementary assessment that goes along the way.
Exactly, and that's the thing. For some modules, that works in terms of do something as a group, but just individually mark it. Or in some modules, it's like, okay, well, you've got 50% of your mark is the group mark, but you still have 50% that's your individual mark. For my modules that I'm leading at the moment, none of my assessments have that group element. And so what I have to do instead is think about, right, how am I getting students to talk to each other in the classroom and get familiar with kind of collaborating in those different ways. So again, lots of the tasks that I'll do will be, working in tables, in small groups. And again, I usually, if I can, I usually try and give students the choice of working in pairs, in small groups, and sometimes individually if there's sort of, someone who I know really sort of struggles in that area, because we do have to be mindful of accessibility and inclusivity as well. And so thinking about those opportunities and those frustrations. So one of the things that I'm sure my students hate me for is the amount of time that I give them to do tasks and it not being enough time. So I'm there going, you've got 5 minutes left, you've got 3 minutes left, you've got 1 minute left. And then they have to send me something and then we go through it and, project it onto the screen so the whole group is looking at it. And then they're going, we didn't do this, we didn't do this. And that's part of the point. I'm going, it doesn't have to be great. I'm not, if I was expecting you to do a hugely polished piece of work, I'd give you 2 hours to work on this thing. I'm giving you 20 minutes. But having to deal with those frustrations, everyone try and put their kind of thoughts in.
But the analytical procedural aspect, what becomes a priority to them, what can be accomplished in 20 minutes is a whole new realm of thinking for learners. And we've had conversations about time allocation for certain things, not necessarily in the podcast, just as a teacher's conversation. And the moment you give a command that says this activity is going to last 20 minutes and you go, what's another couple? Okay, I can see you're all doing really well. Take 30 minutes on this. the expectations and the understanding of what's actually true or not.
Yeah.
From the student's perspective to what the teacher's asking
Yeah.
becomes shady. And I feel like when it comes to that, the power of that 20 minutes or the time where you think, because sure, that 20 minutes, for example, if that was a genuine 20 minutes of a task that you set, you're thinking in your head, what's accomplishable in that?
Yeah, and
I'm
also thinking, I mean, there's certain tasks where I'll say, how long do you need? And that, again, it'll be a negotiation. And in that case, if we're thinking different things, I usually say, okay, well, I'll give you 15 minutes and then we'll see where we're at.
Yeah.
And then I'll give you another 5. But like say, kind of going, okay, well, how long do you think you need? So that, again, they feel like there's some, they do have some control.
Yes.
Although, again, my student said to me today, you knew before you asked us, you knew how long. And I said, no, I genuinely didn't. But I've also got to try and fit in a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
I need to fit in the time to look through the work that you create. So yeah, for me, it's about getting them to work in groups at those particular times and work through their particular quibbles or qualms. Again, in a lecture the other day, they were playing video games to kind of think about neoliberalism and thinking about, giving them enough chance to, like I say, engage with the task and engage with each other, and also thinking about, when you're creating group tasks and you're creating collaboration. Again, why do we create group tasks at university? Because you're going to have to work in groups in the rest of your life, probably. What is a really big part of working in groups for the rest of your life? Communication. And also being someone that people can get along with. So if I say, right, you've got 20 minutes to do this, and they spend the first 5 minutes catching up about their weekend, that's not actually necessarily a bad thing, right? Okay, it means they've got a little bit less time to do the task, but you are embedding in them, again, those skills of just being able to talk to each other, communicate with each other as people, and have the self-discipline to then go, right, okay, we've had a chat, now we need to, now Poppy's looking at us and and we need to kind of get back on task. And again, I'm very, very blessed that certainly all of the students I've taught at BCU are generally want to engage, if they're there. And again, I think that's why if you're thinking about, right, well, how do I engage you in an activity? And I did say to a few students after, having the opportunity to play games, a few of them didn't. And I said, look, I've given you the opportunity to play games here, and I could have given you something else to read. Think about the opportunities that you're kind of taking and you're given. But yeah, I think for me, that collaboration, it's also about embedding that in how they talk to each other as well, in terms of peer review and peer discussion. So I often get them to talk to each other about their assignments, their assignment ideas, where they think each other's strengths and weaknesses might be, different elements of constructive criticism.
Which are hard conversations to have. But
really hard, yeah.
The learners show that level of vulnerability, but it's coming from a good place at the same time as well, which again it gives them an opportunity to be citizens within their own classroom, which again empowers them when they are doing things externally at the same time.
And I think also it's about facilitating those conversations as well, and showing that being critical of someone's work and that constructive criticism, that isn't being nasty, it's literally being helpful. That is like, you can help each other just as much as I can help you. Like, yes, there are specific things that I can do that you can't do just because I know more about them. But what you bring to each other and to the classroom and to the discussion is incredibly important. Another thing, again, in terms of collaboration and that sort of discussion in the classroom for media, when we're working across media, communication, cultural studies, again, I have students who are from a really wide variety of diverse backgrounds. So embedding at the beginning of a module, look, we're going to talk to each other with respect. We might disagree, but, we're all bringing different perspectives. and then allowing the students to share their own experiences. So one of, as I said, my lesson this morning on social media where they were doing these campaigns, one of them was #knackerednomore, and it was that they were petitioning for a change in legislation so that the UK government would implement more break times in schools.
Wow.
And one of the students in the group was from Hong Kong, and she was talking about how in Hong Kong they have breaks at different times of day and they have the opportunities to sleep. And of course, this was making my UK students just like absolutely appalled. Yep. But again, it demonstrates how much I think all of us, we are quite isolated within our own cultural context. And the opportunity to learn from others, again, is really crucially important.
Yeah. It just got me thinking, in terms of mentioning Hong Kong, it brought up a conversation with Nick Irving yesterday about how he has this transnational education going back and forth with firms and universities in Hong Kong. And I was thinking how wonderful it would be to go and see what in media and comms, what that is taught like and built around with and then looking at a way in which BCU can maybe connect other people.
And I'm giving an online guest lecture in November for one of our partner institutes in India on memes and political use of memes.
Nice.
And again, it's that kind of discussion about, well, how does this relate? So
I think that would be amazing.
Hopefully.
Moving forward to reflection and impact, we're looking at the way in which we can explore like real world outcomes and maybe your lessons learnt. Firstly, how have your students responded to the STEAM inspired learning?
I mean, I think that for them, again, I think it's quite natural within media. Again, I think we're very lucky from that perspective because so much of what we do is arts and technology sort of implicitly, certainly in my modules, because as I say, I do sort of teach some more of the digital ones. So I think it's really about them thinking about working with technologies to allow for their artistic expression, and really the stuff that's based in the classroom is then all about how do they visualize that for their assessments. So that's the key kind of journey there, is sort of thinking, right, when we're thinking about getting you to consider a media text in relation to different cultural theories, where do we see this happening already? How can we do that alongside? How can we, analyze, like say, this TikTok? How can we look at this music video? How can we do these things? And so the articulation there of their understandings of how arts and technologies are feeding together, as well as I say, some of those kind of more structural issues around how things are engineered and how things are created that impact us culturally, specifically when we think about minorities and how they're kind of represented or not through the design of certain technologies. I think our students respond really well to it, but I don't think that they necessarily see themselves as STEAM learners.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Because I think it's just implicit. And so that is one of the things. And I again was talking to students last week about this idea of, as I say, the Mickey Mouse degree discourse and how problematic it is, and why people think that way, and how that comes from a history of privileging certain ideas and certain people over others. So like I say, for me, it's about when tackling some of those issues with students, is about thinking about how do we look into the root of that and where these ideas are coming from, and contextualizing them, as I say, sort of historically, to say, well, why do people think that, and where does that come from? And it's not just the case of a few people who don't know what they're talking about. Of course they don't know what they're talking about, but it comes from, as I say, a kind of wider discourse. So I don't think that our students necessarily see themselves as STEAM learners. And I think this is one of the things with STEAM is about how that gets turned into useful communicative language for our students. And a lot of that is about them understanding the transferability of the skills that they have, which is obviously at the heart of what STEAM is about. But I think they do see the transferability of the skills that they have, not least because the roles that a lot of our alumni go on to have really kind of come across a diverse...
It had me thinking in terms of transferability, now being the fourth time we've used it in the space of 30 seconds. I think in just the conversation we've had, the way in which your level 4, 5 and 6 connect together offers every single opportunity for learners to have that transferability improved and improved and improved. And especially now that students can see the outcomes of former graduates, and they're seeing where that's going, and where certain learners are heading in the direction that they're travelling, that only adds to that learning connectedness. And I think that's one massive push for staff coming onto this journey who may have taken up course lead positions, the way in which your levels of study connect with each other, not just through title of modules, but through the way in which modules are assessed, like building the innovative use of different patterns, and that is going to be way more useful than anything else. But the way in which then the stories connect is key.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of that is about thinking about how you also allow space for experimentation, but as I said before, that kind of idea of experimentation without all of the stakes, because
you will find learners are willing to experiment more if they know as to the reason as to why they are experimenting, because they see the links.
And again, it's about if you're assessing them on an experiment and they think, oh well, if the experiment fails, then I fail. That's very different to that whole kind of thing of, well, if you experimented on something and you know what went wrong and then you tell me about what went wrong, then actually that's quite good because you get to show me more skills.
Hello Maths GCSE questions and answers. You don't necessarily get graded on the answer, you get
but the working.
Precisely,
exactly.
Which I think is a wonderful way to bring in assessment.
I've been using that notion a lot, really, actually, about show your working, and I think that is really important. But again, we have to understand that students are going to stress about their final grade because we live in a society that is putting increasing amounts of pressure on that. So it's about how do we navigate that in ways that do allow students to experiment and try different things out without it being, okay, that's their kind of, that's the end, that's the finished product, And so, I think it's a lot about having that opportunity to play around with stuff and sort of see what sticks as well, and to be able to again do that with each other, and again, a lot of my students are just so giving in their discussions, and they really do kind of bounce off each other. But that's again why I kind of think giving students the opportunity to just chat to each other about some of the questions that you've got. And kind of think, right, what of this sticks with you? What doesn't stick with you? What kind of, even down to, like, I got students to read an article from The Guardian the other day, and then I said, pick a quote that, like, stands out to you. And they were all, like, looking really disgusted at each other with, like, some of the quotes that they'd pulled out. And that's a really useful thing because, the quote that you pick doesn't have to be, it could have been in the first paragraph, but okay, why did that stick out to you? And again, getting students going, oh, yeah. And I mean, this is really basic discussion-based stuff.
No, but these are tasks that are useful. I used to go and do the newspaper. I used to do a newspaper task a lot of the times where a lot of my students were coming in through different forms of transport, so we'd be able to go and pick up the metro, or be able to go and pick up any form of newspaper. And so I asked them every Monday, just please bring a newspaper in with you every time you're coming in, because it's a great resource. But the first thing, but then we'd have a range, so people would nick their dads. from Sunday and
Yeah.
bring it in. Let's find a story that every newspaper has in common.
Yeah.
Now, let's find a story. Let's pick out bits from each of the newspapers. What's the difference?
Yeah.
Where's the criticality now in the research when you are now looking at books and you're looking at journal articles and you're researching through literature? Now, what's the benefit of you having a wider expanse in your research at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is also about students understanding the benefit of both kind of the media formats that they're exploring, but also the academic discussions about them. And I always, a lot of the time I just ask students at the start of the question, what media have you consumed this week? Because obviously that's the course. Like I'm like, what being on doom scrolling on TikTok for 3 hours is quite valid when you're doing a media degree. You need to understand it, as is watching, a film marathon. This is good. So it's again about sort of saying, like, this is the course you're doing. So these practices are part of your embedded and embodied knowledge. And so that's really useful. But also on the flip side, explain to them, okay, why do I say use this is the type of literature that I want you to review? Why do the learning outcomes say scholarly articles? Why do I want you to use those rather than a newspaper article or a blog? Explaining to them things like what it is to be a doctor of philosophy, what it is for me to publish my research. Because otherwise it's like, well, then otherwise it just looks like I'm arbitrarily saying I want you to use these things from the library, sort of thing.
I think it's a great lesson for level 4 learners.
But this is the thing, it's about going, okay, this is what's happening here, and this is what a process of peer review is, and this is what blind peer review is, and this is how these processes demonstrate that as much as you hate having to do referencing, I hate it too, and all of these kinds of things. But that it gives students that kind of just that foundational knowledge that situates them more clearly and means that they're not just thinking, again, this is some sort of arbitrary rule, but that it is something that is implemented for a reason, and that I want them to understand that. Same as the discussion of, okay, well, this is why you can't use AI. Oh, but you then said we should use that. Oh, yeah, actually. And that being a discussion, a thing that is responding to. So if I'm saying you can't use it because of this reason, but then students are saying, well, actually, what about this reason? And then I say, you know what, those are two totally different contexts. And you're right, in that context, it makes sense. So again, I think, and obviously one of the, things that we're dealing with a lot at the moment is AI. And how we want students to be utilising or responding to the changes of those digital media technologies. And that for me is a lot about your being question and your, how am I helping students to grow into these adaptable, ethical professionals? The growth of students is happening alongside technologies at all times. And oh God, it's terrible being like the age I am now and having started lecturing at the age I did, which is over 10 years ago. And back in the day, I was kind of like not too far apart in age from my students. And now I say things where they're like, I was 5. And I'm like, oh my God. But again, thinking about those technological changes and thinking about how media has changed.
We've seen the most technology.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my students looked appalled the other day when I said that I'd grown up with 4 TV channels, and just some of those contextual shifts. So thinking about how much I use technologies and how much again, a lot of what I do is based in digital media or digital cultures or digital practices, and how, as a games researcher, I'm very used to hearing terrible things about technology and, for example, how games are really bad for us and all of these things, and sort of going, well, okay, that's a really reductionist attitude.
You have an ally in gamifications and play with.
Yeah, absolutely. So. And thinking, it's such a reductionist attitude towards games, and it revolves around moral panics and all of these different things, and what we call media effects theory, which is this kind of idea of what you consume, you will sort of become, as if anyone who's seen anything violent on TV ever then becomes the embodiment of that. So the good thing about my rage, about my own research field, that being just like such a sort of old and boring argument, is that I then take that into, okay, well, when we think about it with AI, how are we going to respond to that? Now, AI is an incredibly unethical tool from a variety of ways, and it's really important, again, with media students, that they understand in what ways is it unethical when we think about their creativity, when we think about the creativity of artists, and when you ask, AI to generate some art for you, where it's getting all of the ideas, inspiration, styles, and content from. Is from stealing other people's art. And of course, the same goes for the words that it creates. But thinking about that, as much as I would, love to be like, no AI ever again, like, let's banish it. That is not going to happen at all. And so teaching students about some of the ethical implications of AI, about thinking about how we've seen technologies, for example, take people's jobs in the past, what new roles that has created. But really key is the media literacy element of using artificial intelligence and understanding the implications for what you're doing, for what it's doing, for what it's saying. Ideas of, AI hallucinations, but...
Well, it's big one. So this is quite interesting in terms of what the university is wanting the staff to really focus on, being academic literacy and digital literacy, but what media literacy?
Yeah.
Could you expand on that? For me, really.
Well, thinking about the kind of literacy in all of these things, when we think about media literacy, a lot of it is about the criticality, again, that we bring to when we see, like, key example, when we see, Boris Johnson put on the side of a bus, I can't even remember the amount, what was it, £150,000 a year going to the EU, or must have been more than that. It could be spent on our NHS hospitals. Yeah. Media literacy is going, right, I see that image and I see that quote, and I'm going to be critical about the believability of that. Okay. That's a really important thing, because we end up just running with that example, where people think they are informed about a policy or a change or something. They think that they're informed about it because they've read about it. But it's that criticality of going, is that true? Is that true? And so media literacy, again, you read an article in the newspaper, rather than just going, oh, well, it's the news, it must be true. You go, is that true? You read between the lines, you look at the rhetorics of what is being employed, the language that's used, and how that's conveying a particular side of a story.
If we can develop, this is just my mind going, if we can develop criticality in media literacy in our learners from the get-go, then it's going to empower academic.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. Media literacy is really the kind of 101 for that critical thinking, and that and just asking, do I believe it? Why do I believe it? What am I being? What do they want me to believe? And even if you end up going, yes, I do believe it, and I feel, that's absolutely fine.
Some might not.
Yeah. And the thing is, it's about the process of considering what you're seeing. And so when we think about, and again, it goes to, filmic representations of, blonde bombshells being at the mercy of, the hero who has to come and save them, thinking again, what is the message that is being sent here? So the key thing there with AI and the content that AI creates is, again, being skeptical of what is being told to you by AI. So, okay, it says it says these things, but where is it getting that information from? And the key thing, again, with large language models, for example, is you can get it to lie to you very easily. You can get it to make stuff up. You can get it to, it's told me, I've asked ChatGPT before, for example, what has Poppy Wilde written? And it comes up with stuff that I think, well, I wish I had written about that, but I haven't. And so that AI media literacy about using those critical thinking tools, but also the critical visual interrogation. It's like the thing of, have you counted how many fingers there are on that person's hand? And is that an AI depiction? Those kinds of things. And so understanding the criticality that we need to employ when using new technologies, as well as understanding the ethical implications, and with that, thinking about culturally, who is that affecting the most? As well as thinking about environmental factors, a lot of the things that people don't think about with AI is the amount of power that it is consuming, the amount of energy, the amount of water consumption that goes into cooling servers, for example, that are AI servers. And so you end up where we're now in a situation where there are certain, like villages, for example, who are the people are running out of water because the water is being kind of siphoned up to go into the server cooling engines that are running AI servers. So all of these different things, it's not to say I'm expecting my students to never use AI again, but it's understanding what using AI means. Yeah. It's the broader implications for that. So for me, thinking about ethical professionals is thinking about, right, okay, what is it to you as a creator to then in your career to use AI to create a banner image rather than to use another creative artist to use a banner image, right? What is that doing, and how is that? Now, a lot of the time, obviously, when we think about using these technologies ethically, it's about that criticality, and it's about using them in tandem with other things. But for me, it's about those kinds of things. It's about thinking about the people who are being affected by these practices, and just raising awareness of that, so that students aren't just going, oh yeah, it's fine, it doesn't matter, there's no consequences. There are consequences. If you are okay with the consequences, that's okay, And I also talk to my students about it's the same as I admit to them that, for example, I have an Amazon Prime subscription. Now, Amazon, we know, is not an ethical company, right? I still have an Amazon Prime subscription, but it's about the knowledge of then having that knowledge to make those choices, rather than being kind of oblivious to them. And as I say, I think particularly for people who are working in the creative industries, thinking about what these technologies mean now, what they will mean in the future, how they'll be gatekept economically as well, and the potential different infrastructures that will be involved in that. And thinking about that in terms of their ethical practice and the kind of professionals that they want to be. Now, that's not to say that they will be able to enact their personal ethical beliefs right from the get-go out of university. It may well be that, they have to work some kind of dodgy jobs that they don't feel necessarily ethically aligned to the organisation that they work for in the beginning. But it's still about the aspiration of sort of where they want to go, what they want to be, and how that will feed into their aspirations for employability.
And just the way in which they understand themselves that little bit more, which I think is going to be one of those, you keep on referring to Mickey Mouse course, and I totally, having been a sports teacher, I get that.
Yeah.
But the level of holistic teaching, the way in which we're bringing so much more into the courses than that is just learning outcomes and what they come and they start with, the way in which the wider package is that much greater, because you get to have those open discussions with them, you get to challenge their thinking, you get to really make them a more rounded human being before they leave you to go and do what they're doing, is key. Can I finish off with some quick fire closes?
Okay.
There's 3.
Okay.
Every single time I've started to go and do this with previous guests on the podcast, we get through 1.
Oh, okay. I'll try and.
Let's see what we can do. Describe STEAM teaching philosophy, or your STEAM teaching philosophy, in 3 words.
Oh, I did think about this because you sent this over, and I did think about it. Say it again. Describe
your STEAM teaching philosophy in 3 words.
Embedded. Challenging.
It's a toughie, isn't it?
Yeah. Maybe.
My favourite was enjoyable. From previous guests.
Okay, what did I say? I said embedded, challenging, and provocative.
Ooh, even better.
Yeah, so you raised the stakes there with enjoyability.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, I swore. Sorry, everybody. One piece of advice for someone trying to implement STEAM ideas.
Don't think about it too hard.
Cool.
That's what I would say. I think that there's so much STEAM stuff that we all do inherently. As I say, and hopefully, people listening to this podcast are thinking, do you know what? She's talking about really basic stuff. If they're thinking that, then I'm like, well, actually, that's kind of great, because the point is it shouldn't be a forced process. There should already be those links. Now, in some disciplines and some courses, it's more apparent than in others. But actually, don't overthink it. And probably just try and have a conversation with someone who would look at your teaching from a different perspective, because then you'll be going, oh, well, I'm doing loads of stuff about engineering here, and then I might come in and go, well, to me that's a really artistic question, and that's really creative, and that's really about humanities and about behavior and these sorts of things. So I
think the one thing that a lot of staff are doing is they're seeing their lack of cross discipline or cross college discipline. They're not taking advantage of that, and therefore they're not then STEAM if they're not. When in actual fact, what we are seeing is that a lot of teachers, practitioners are embedding, course leads are embedding really informative, interesting, enjoyable aspects of their teaching and learning. It's just that next step of realising that you're doing it. So it's more of a confidence boosting thing.
I think it's, rather than thinking, oh, I need to embed STEAM, start from the space of, how am I doing this already? Because you might not think you are, but you probably are. So,
Cool. And then one key takeaway you'd like listeners to remember.
Media degrees, arts degrees, humanities degrees are not, sports degrees are not Mickey Mouse degrees. They're integral, important subjects that shape how we live, what we consume, the joy that we get from the world around us, and how we understand the world around us. And integrating artistic, critical, compassionate understandings of people can only be a good thing in this world, especially when we're living in these really turbulent times. Thinking more holistically about people is always going to be the right side of history.
I needn't say any more other than thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.